All right, welcome back to another episode of Modern Cyber. We are again back into our breach series where we go into conversations with people who have been there, done that, so to speak, and who have actually lived through some of the pain, some of the suffering that it is to go through a data breach or a data compromise event, incident, however you want to phrase it. But, we're talking to people. And again, a reminder, the purpose of this series is not to kind of name and shame. No, in fact, quite the contrary. The purpose is to shed light on how these things actually play out in the real world and to share real world learnings and experiences. We've got an interesting conversation teed up today with somebody who comes from the MSP space, which is, again, a space that I don't know a ton about myself. But I know a lot of our audience is either in that space or adjacent to that space and has learned a lot. So I am thrilled to be joined today by Adam Burns, the CEO at BlackVeil. Adam has spent his entire career in the MSP space, starting out as a service coordinator, help desk, modern workplace, project delivery, all of the kind of stuff that has to get done to make these services work. It's really a way to cut your teeth, learn, work your way up through everything, working with MSBs all the way up through the enterprise. Adam, great background. I've done some of that stuff myself. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today on Modern Cyber.
Thanks for having me, Jeremy. No, I'm really looking forward to chatting and hopefully shedding some light on how these things play out in the real world.
Yeah. So let's get into the conversation. On those lines, like I tell everybody, and the first questions we always ask is, give us a little bit of context. What type of organization were you working at the time? What was the time frame for the incident that we're talking about? And what were some of your first indicators?
Okay, so at the time I was working for a managed service provider. We had quite a number of customers. This particular customer was quite large. They basically got hit with a phishing attack. Okay. And we worked out that they'd been in the environment for at least a few weeks before they actually chose to detonate. And the way that we actually noticed it was all their servers and desktops just started going offline. We were getting all sorts of alerts into our ticketing system. Then obviously they phoned the help desk and said, "Hey, what's going on? All our machines are just turning off around us." And it was at that point that we realized, something's really wrong. And it just so happened that one of our other engineers was sitting on the backup server at the time. And luckily he saw what was happening and switched it off before that got hit.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that for a second, because there's a couple things that you said I want to just make sure I understand correctly. So you mentioned that you start getting these tickets coming in, and these are automated tickets coming off of the systems before the client has phoned into the help desk, right?
Yeah, it was just a whole heap of offline alerts for their servers. Yeah.
Okay. And so did you have something from, let's say, from your side as the MSP monitoring their environments, doing like ping checks or some kind of system health checks?
Yeah, it was just an RMM tool. So obviously it sends us an alert when something goes offline and has been offline for more than 5 minutes. So we started getting, they had about 60, 70 servers. So we just started getting those fire through. And obviously that's not normal. It's either a power outage or something really bad's happened.
Right. But along those lines, I'm curious, right? So RMM to me implies that you're remote, right? Remote management software. So when you get this initial alert, you see these systems going offline. Okay, there's an issue. How do you figure out from that point that how do you go from offline to determining that there's been a phishing attack? Like, what were the steps to kind of trace through there and understand? Because I imagine getting access to those systems and then getting the server logs, that doesn't just magically happen.
No, we basically, we knew there was an issue when everything started going offline. Obviously, we weren't too sure what at the time. Yeah. But just from some of the descriptions from the staff on site at this customer of how it started and how everything just kind of cascaded, we assumed that it was a breach. And then we confirmed, after a little bit of digging, that there was a phishing email that had been clicked on. Literally everything on the network got hit.
Okay. And when you say everything on the network got hit, did it sound very much like it was cascading from, system A to system B to system C, that type of pattern?
That type of pattern, yeah. It went through the servers first, and then it did the desktops after that.
Okay. And so doesn't sound to me like there was a lot of, let's say, like network segmentation that was disconnecting desktops from servers.
No, nothing like that. No, it
Okay.
was a flat network as well. So yeah.
And was that like, was that a conscious design decision, or was that just kind of like, hey, we're a small company, we're not really that big a target. Why would we need this complicated network topology?
Yeah, I mean, this particular customer had been a customer of ours for some time, and we'd obviously alerted them to some issues with their setup, but they decided, for whatever reason, that they weren't going to invest in technology at the time.
Yeah.
And yeah, unfortunately, they learned a quite an expensive lesson.
Yeah.
Always, yeah, keep your tech up to date and make sure it's secure.
Well, along those lines, to try to think about keeping the tech up to date, you said something earlier that you realized that they had kind of been on the systems for a little while. How did you figure that out?
We found a basically one of their entry points. They left some evidence behind, some files that they'd been manipulating while they were connected, and we just saw the created date of that file.
Yep.
And that was a couple of weeks prior to the detonation. So they'd been in there digging about and looking for whatever it was that they wanted to find, I guess. And
So
once they'd done their reconnaissance, they hit detonate.
it detonate in this case means triggering a malware of some kind.
Yes, sorry, triggering their attack essentially, which kicked off the malware and encrypted everything.
Oh, so this is like, kind of ransomware type malware, yes?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't understand that sooner when you were kind of going through it. And
No
so,
worries.
but like along those lines, was this one of the kind of more sophisticated packages that, some of the EDR tools weren't detecting well at the time?
Yes, this was not picked up at all. I can't remember the type of antivirus that we were using at the time or that customer was using, but it wasn't. It relied on definition files. It wasn't, one of the smarter ones with machine learning and looking at patterns and whatnot. So, yeah, even though their AV was up to date, it just didn't pick up on this
Interesting.
particular kind of attack. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, talk us through the response. You've done your reconnaissance at this point to kind of understand, okay, it was a phishing attack that uh, gave the attacker system access. It happened a few weeks back. You found some files. You kind of have an understanding about how the breaches happened up to this point. What were your steps from that point forward?
So at that point, we rallied the troops, took basically a stock take, right, of what actually was hit and what we actually had left to recover from, if anything.
Okay.
I mentioned earlier, luckily, one of my colleagues was on their backup server while this was going down. And I kid you not, he saw files being encrypted as he was on the server and he turned it off, basically in the nick of time before it got to the backups. So we turned that back on with no network access, so it couldn't do anything.
Okay.
And basically restored everything pre-attack. And then we had to basically rebuild the server. So we rebuilt the entire network from the ground up. We kept the domain, but everything, our server, every single desktop was completely wiped and reset. And we built a brand new infrastructure for them, really. Brand new Citrix environment, new Exchange server, new domain controllers, the whole 9 yards, yeah. And then there was a team of about 4 of us working on it for a month. This was a nationwide business as well. So, yeah, we were sending USB build keys to the offices around the country and getting the staff to rebuild everything for us as well, because obviously we couldn't get right around the country ourselves.
Yeah. So USB build keys for people like me who haven't done this in a little while. This is effectively the equivalent of like machine images, right? Like,
Essentially,
reboot. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So we basically sent each site a bunch of USB sticks with PC images on them and a sheet to follow. So, and that sped the whole recovery process up because they have a lot of staff. They're all around the country. So, yeah, very helpful.
I mean, I was about to ask, like, what you're describing, this sounds like, well, actually, before we get into the human impact, real quick, was there a ransom message? Did the client choose to pay the ransom? How was that handled?
Yeah, so about 2 weeks after the recovery was complete, the owner of the company received a ransom email, and it was a screenshot of their files.
Yep.
And they basically left a demand. I can't remember the exact figure, but they said if you don't pay the fine, pay the fee, we're going to release your data onto the dark web.
Okay.
They consulted us at that point. We just told them not to pay. As you should, really. That's your last resort, paying them, because that just encourages them to keep doing it. And also, you never know what's in the unencrypted. Once they release the data to you, they could leave another payload in there and do it again. So we told them not to pay, and it was basically just time lost. They recovered everything.
But on that topic, like the time loss sounds pretty substantial. Because, I mean, given that this is a nationwide customer that you're working with, they've got, I don't know, tens of locations and, hundreds of employees that we're talking about. Like, and you're sending out these USB keys, you've got to prep them, you've got to prep the instruction sheet, get everything out to everybody. What are we talking about? Like 2 weeks of lost company time multiplied by X employees?
Yeah, roughly about 2 weeks they were down in some capacity, which really it's not that bad if you consider the scale of the attack. Literally everything got hit. So 2 weeks is probably not too bad in the grand scheme of things.
It's funny you said that because, I've talked to other people where, 2 days is viewed as massive just because of, let's say, like lost revenue or, larger organization. Obviously, the amount of downtime is multiplied by the number of employees, locations, services, etc. And we could easily be into the tens or hundreds of millions of dollars with larger organizations. So, but I totally get your perspective that 2 weeks, as opposed to A, going out of business, or B, let's say like terrible reputational and brand damage and things like that, and loss of customer trust. I get your perspective on that.
Yeah, it was. I mean, 2 weeks does sound like a long time. I guess the thing I didn't say was that a lot of their staff weren't computer users, so they could operate in some form or another. So it was essentially like management and head office that got hit. The rest of the team could do their work in some capacity, although quite limited. Yeah, because obviously the type of industry they're in is quite heavily reliant on computers, but the staff themselves aren't. If you know what I mean.
Got it. Yep. Understood. Got it. Yeah, that provides a lot more context as to why, in the grand scheme of how you might look at it, this is like, yes, expensive on the one hand, but on the other hand, we're able to remain in business, we're able to keep operating, we're losing some productivity, but the general output of the organization isn't too severely impacted. Makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't a fun time for them, but they could.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, as you think back on it, first of all, like one of the first things that comes to my mind is like, how lucky were you that you had a colleague sitting on a backup server at that point in time who noticed it and took the exact right action to take the system offline?
I mean, yeah. Have you ever heard of anyone having that luck before? I haven't. That was super lucky, man. Yeah.
No. Yeah. And when you think about, let's say, like lessons learned for the organization, what do you come away with thinking about as like, that really taught me X?
Basically, to never overlook the basics. I mean, you can spend a lot on fancy firewalls and EDR software and whatnot, but if you haven't got the basic security protocols in place and tightened up, like email authentication, then you leave yourself open to phishing attacks and spoofing and things like that. So the big takeaway from me for this was to make sure you've at least got the basics right.
And when you talk about the basics on the email side, I mean, I hear a lot of things about email, and I'm no expert on email security. I hear about like DKIM and DMARC and SPF and all these different things coming on the DNS side. And of course, like multi-factor authentication as far as access to the mailboxes and, and then employee security awareness around like keep an eye out for phishing emails, what to look for, that kind of thing. But like, what else should we be thinking about with regards to email security?
So yeah, like you mentioned with SPF, DKIM, DMARC, good example actually is Yahoo and Google are actually enforcing DMARC records now. So you got to make sure you actually have one. Otherwise, they'll block your email straight out. But SPF, DKIM, DMARC all work in harmony together, and basically it's like a list of you've deemed a bunch of servers able to send emails on behalf of your domain, right? So you configure those records with those entries and set them to a strict policy. That way, if anything sends mail on behalf of your domain that's not specifically listed in those records, the recipient should block that message. And that is how you avoid spoofing and phishing attacks, because the hacker then has to hijack one of those servers. Otherwise, they can't do it.
Right. I mean, it does sound like we're moving kind of necessarily towards an internet where, you know, the changes that the major providers, and when I say major providers, I mean major providers on the email side, which is like Google, Yahoo, Microsoft, right? Primarily. The changes that they make will have a trickle effect across the ecosystem, right? Because if they change the rules and they say strict policy, strict enforcement, more or less everybody's going to have to comply over some time period.
Pretty much, yeah. You'll have to conform, right? Because it's Google. you're gonna need to email Google at some point, right? So yeah. And plus, it's definitely in everybody's best interest to get these records configured properly. Otherwise, you might experience something like this customer did.
Yeah. And not to kind of shamelessly plug what you guys are working on over at BlackVeil, but I take it this exact set of circumstances around checking domains and checking email conformity with all of these policies is something that you guys are working on, right?
Correct. Yeah, we've seen an issue. Like, I've been in the industry for a long time, and I've noticed that these issues are still apparent and very common. So I've taken it upon myself to build a system to help people sort that out, because it's those three records, even though there's only three of them, they're quite confusing. They can be very confusing to even a senior engineer if you haven't spent a lot of time in the email space. But the power of having them configured correctly, it's unmatched.
Yeah. Awesome. Any other kind of lessons learned with regards to, let's say, like, making the right level of investment in security products, not overlooking security in favor of, cost-cutting measures, or anything around, let's say, the backups or whatnot that you'd want to share with the audience?
Yeah, I guess the main learning from me for this particular issue was always air gap your backups. Don't have it on the domain. Don't have it on the same network as everything else. Because if you get hit, at least your backups are safe. So sure it's off premise, but if it's off premise, can people still get to it? You got to make sure that it's air gapped and only a particular couple of machines can get to that server or whatever it is. Yeah.
In the MSP world, do you follow the 3-2-1 backups rule? 3 backup copies, 2 different media types, 1 offsite.
We try to, but living in New Zealand, it's quite a small country, right? So people's investment in tech might be a little bit less than what you might be used to seeing.
Yeah.
So, like, for example, like a Microsoft best practice is, New Zealand is not going to be conforming to that most of the time. We kind of do our own thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
totally understood. Well, Adam, this has been really helpful. I've really enjoyed it. We've got like just 1 or 2 minutes left, and I'd love to hear, because I know you've also been through kind of the madness that was CrowdStrike last year and what went on there. I wonder if you could just like briefly share your experience there and some of the actions that you took on that.
Oh man, yeah. I'd actually finished for the day when it all started kicking off, and I was at a shop. Custom gave me a call and said, are you doing any work, Adam? All of our servers have gone down. I was like, no, I'm actually not even at my computer. He's like, okay, well, everything's going down. I said, okay, well, I'll head home and see what's going on. So I headed home, jumped on our machine, and I could see in our internal chats at work, a few other customers' machines were falling over. They were all kind of like in the same area. So we thought initially it was a power outage. We quickly figured out, no, it was CrowdStrike. And basically every customer of ours basically got hit by it. luckily, I had the quick thinking to jump on our RMM system before it got hit by that CrowdStrike update and switched it off. Uninstalled CrowdStrike and switched it off before that update rolled out to it. So we were able to get back online and start assisting people pretty quickly. We were down for maybe an hour or two.
Interesting. Yeah. And do you have any idea like what percentage of, let's say, the total fleet across the customers was hit versus what percentage you were able to kind of, proactively remove CrowdStrike from?
So we only proactively removed it from our own systems. By that time, everything else had been hit. So even all of our servers got hit except those RMN tools. So yeah, it was basically 50-60% of our customers and 95% of our own systems.
Yeah. Did you have to go through similar kind of recovery techniques, mailing out keys and whatnot to get people back online?
It wasn't as bad. We did roll out some instructions and keys as well, but it wasn't as bad as that cyber attack.
Gotcha.
Obviously, the machines didn't need a full rebuild, so yeah.
And it's so funny. I mean, if you look at kind of the post-mortem on that event itself, right? I think a lot of people have classified it as a cyber attack, and I don't really view that as an accurate description. It was basically a bad patch, right? It was like a bad software update.
It was a botched update, yeah. So I guess, lessons learned from that is to make sure that you thoroughly test updates and then test the rollback as well.
Yeah.
Before you comes back to go.
Totally. And it comes back to something you said towards the beginning of the episode. It's like always the fundamentals and the basics. And, we've done a few episodes here on this breach series. And I think almost every guest that we've had on has reinforced that same set of principles. Don't overlook the basics. Remember the fundamentals. Backups has come into play, I think, in every single episode that we've done in the breach series to date. So the importance of backups, I think, can't be overstated. Well, Adam Burns, thank you so much for taking the time, for sharing your experience. I know this was a little while ago, but love learning about this. And I think all the things that you said are still relevant in the world today. For people who want to learn more about you and about the work you're doing on the email security side, it's just www.BlackVeil, and that's VEIL. .co.nz or NZ, as you would say, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. If you go to the site now, you'll see it's under maintenance because we're working on a couple of things. We'll be back up in April, but feel free to reach out and say hi. We're on LinkedIn. Go company page on there if you want to pop over and say hi.
Awesome. Well, thank you one more time, Adam. And to our audience, remember the call is still out. We've got a number of these episodes recorded. They'll be releasing, but we're also always looking for guests who can come on, share their knowledge, share their experience of what they've been through in a real world cyber breach scenario. We will talk to you next time on Modern Cyber. Bye-bye.